So businesses may be prepared for a flooding event, but not necessarily cyclone. Then again, the path, the trajectory, the impact as a whole. I mean, with TC Winston, we have seen whilst the cyclone passed through a certain particular patch, some houses were totally gone and others were standing still. There were coconut trees, some where the tops fell off and it's dangling, which doesn't happen all the time. And there are other trees standing there with all or most of the nuts still intact. So, it's I guess preparedness and what to what extent and how does it impact us as well. At times they say you were just lucky to be at one place and not the other. In a lot of cases, especially in Fiji, and this is where our issue lies, is you may be prepared with your house, you've got it secured, but you're in the neighborhood, they are not as prepared. One of the major issues that the NDRMO is grappling with at the moment is managing the informal sector. A lot of the dwellings there are not built to standard. So that's where the major gap is in terms of preparedness as a whole. In the event of a cyclone or a disaster, your houses may be secured, you have done everything right, but you have a neighboring or a neighborhood that has a lot of informal settlement, and there's a lot of flying debris that affects or damages or kills as a whole. So I think that's one of the things that we are trying to see if we can advocate and push forward for now as a whole. So maybe that's something just to probably explain. And as Edward alluded, if you pull out a page from Japan, they prepared for a lot of different things. I remember a few years ago on New Year's Day, there was an earthquake on the tarmac, and I think it was 0, there was 1 fatality with everything happening out there. There was 2 planes collided because of the communication system or whatever, but there was no chaos, but in our case, with a little activity, there'll be a lot of chaos. We'll lose more people because of the chaos than the disaster as a whole. So I think that's where that preparedness pace comes into play. And I think everyone has a role to play with preparedness as well. Thanks, everyone.
Also, you mentioned multiple assets. So the flooding, landslides, the cyclone, flooding, landslides, cyclone, tsunami, and then disease. So there's multiple. So we need to also make sure that it captures that in the preparation one. In the recovery part, this is a response preparation. This is also important. Is there, for example, the numbers that we pull up at 40 million lost days, 50 million income loss, they don't have cases. These were based on going and talking to the sector and then understanding how many people those businesses are there. You make projections, estimates. But in the preparedness for recovery, one of the things we are thinking of, it won't be part of this initiative, a separate one, because we have a membership-based organization. We know in our database where the members are. So what we're going to do is we're going to plot them in a map. And if there's a cyclone coming, the cyclone has a track. So you know where it's going to hit. And also it's not instant, like I don't put 3 days. So as a preparedness, we can issue a warning to our members in exactly the path of the cyclone. Send out also preparedness messages. But at the end of the cyclone, we know how many has been hit, how many they employed before and all that. So we have the data of that. And all we have to do is ask them what is the damage. So we can put that into preparedness. And that will inform us who to then partner with them. Because right now, the numbers that you mentioned is actually estimates on the sector, the industry. Doesn't have a key face. Any other comments? Any questions?
Yeah, Edward, if I can make a comment. I don't know if I'm audible. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. I don't know if this point was addressed while I was outside. But personally, what I'd like to see in the toolkit is a dedicated section on financial preparedness. I think that's critical. Specifically on where businesses can go for financial aid. For example, you highlighted parametric insurance. That's a good example. but what other options are available to businesses in the maybe before a disaster as well as after a disaster? So things like maybe there are contingency funds or reserve funds. Maybe the toolkit can talk about how such funds can be established by the businesses themselves. I don't know, in their own balance sheets and budgets. Or maybe there are mechanisms available that they could tap into. I know FDB had a very special scheme during COVID, the COVID loan scheme, which has become controversial. But are there other mechanisms available that we can maybe map for the MSMEs and businesses and include it in the toolkit so that they can refer to that?
I like your suggestion about a directory for MSMEs or where they can go to before and after. Because on the internet is pretty financial. That's a instead of just waiting and if I come up, you don't know where to go to when disaster strikes. I'm not sure what that is. Good solution. Thank you. Directly with the practice. Next. Next time. Any other questions there? Financial stress, we've seen that, delays. So one about delay, I'm concerned, I really like the parametric insurance one, but there's no delay. As soon as the strike is calculated magnitude is more, there's a sort of an instant payout, yeah. While the other ones, you have to wait for like 3 months, 6 months until post-disaster needs assessment is done, the banks are already at the move. So I think that would be the other one is confident the delay. We also got in the proposed schools, we have multi-hazard risk checklist. So yes, there is disaster coming, they're prepared, but prepared for these ones also. That movement, so maybe like before 5 will cause flooding, will cause landslide and so forth. A simple business continuity template, so you can fill very quickly, electronically possible. Emergency roles and communication guide, particularly like MSMEs who have workers. Because the thing is, what we realize with this community planning, like, when the cyclone is coming, you can't send everybody home straight away. It's okay, I need your help, but we manage you, just to make sure secure our stock so that it's safe. So when it's finished, so there's something to come back to. But we also want to see who needs to go home quickly now, and for those who can stay. So it's about also managing, the staff, the roles that they play, and all that is important. As opposed to, okay, read everything and then run to high ground, go home. Yeah. For the business, we need to secure our premises, our stock, our customers, our supply chain, so forth. And asset document protection checklist, because again, not only the loss of income, but the damage to the building and so forth. So the MSMEs, of course, would be like, your stock, it's your rice, your chickens, your goats, those kind of things most people say are small. Okay, would you realistically complete these tools? That's what we can ask you. Don't make it too long, but make it very short. Key information you need from them. Because the thing is, when the disaster, whatever the piece happens, because the humanitarian piece happens, there's an assessment. And before the recovery, there's an assessment. And sometimes there's assessment fatigue. Answering the AGO goes, the crop sector goes, the government goes, they're asking the same thing. So that's the other thing is we need to make sure that we capture that very quickly and the key information and trust. What preventative preparedness in the past, so making sure understanding what they did in the past, and if it worked, build on that, we just don't need for you. I remember in Vanuatu, this have happened when we were there with the DNA. There was reports that the local communities on the side are damaging their produce. We don't calculate damage and losses. So damage figures in the fishing industry were way up. Exactly. So me and my local guy went. The lead was a French person. It's for the media, it's a disaster tourism, all the specialists, all the specialists. They looked at it, yeah. Let's start to the bottom. Because the way the community would protect the cycle, because there's no cycle in the bottom of the ocean. So they would sink it to protect it. But they weren't damaging it. They were just protecting it. So we went back and told the damage and loss numbers came down. That is really what the damage and loss numbers were quite high. So it's working before it's traditional. We think we should do that, build on that. What should be simplified? So we have to make sure that simplify it in terms of language. Well, it was, you're right. Climate change language can be quite overwhelming. So we just want to be true, simplify it, for the SMEs. And see what are we missing. This is another one. What do you think we are missing? Because we don't want to say no, but we don't profess to be real experts, but what are we missing? For a disaster.
Just add into it, probably what are we missing, and probably alluding to your question, in terms of preparedness. When it comes to cyclone and flooding, I guess we are better prepared. The information comes out for one particular place. But was it last year we had a Russian earthquake, which caused a tsunami. In Fiji, the panic button was raised from our neighboring country, New Zealand, because they were saying Pacific or Fiji can be affected by the tsunami. But in Fiji, it was taking a long time for that information to come through. So I guess with this, what we're also trying to do is push forward and try and get some semblance in terms of communication. As we said, no, we prepare for cyclones and probably flooding, but not so much for tsunamis per se. One is maybe because it doesn't happen here, our experience is lacking, or two, we just take it, it's never happened, let it be. When it comes, then we will deal with it. So I think what is one of those missing components there is also the emergency role and the communication guide. How will it come? I mean, NDRMO, they have something in there, but at the moment does not get to the individuals that's out there. And then again, if we communicate one message across the entire country, we create more chaos. The decision to let the children go home or stay in school. In some cases, safety, send them home. In other cases, safety, keep them at school, because on their way home, there's more disaster that's there because you don't know where they're staying as a whole. So I think some of these decisions, and I think we've made, and times we've made some decisions which were not the right decision. We've closed schools when we should have been open, or we've left it open when it's supposed to be closed.
Yeah. The last time we had the tsunami, one of the real one, was a traffic jam. People couldn't get out of the city. So people were trying to get to school. They realized the schools had their own systems. The children are looked after by the teachers, so they know where to go. That created a lot of panic. Yeah, so that's important to talk about it. The other one is the thinking is how far should we go? Should we focus on disaster, which is climate, or any disruption?
Sorry, I'm just gonna add on to that discussion. So from my experience, I'm a BCP trainer. So one of the preparedness components is to have a BCP in for MSMEs specifically. So as most people have explained, the bigger companies already have insurance covers. They've got contingency plans. A lot of them have done their disaster risk reduction over the years. And BCP is fairly new in that space, but it is an option that does apply to both bigger companies and smaller businesses as well. The one thing in terms of private sector, I think, like, this is just my opinion, that we shouldn't focus too much on what the public sector is doing. There is a body already there that already has a mandate. And a lot of these things that we were discussing is very much what the government should be doing in terms of, the preparedness. And there have been over the years, that whole community initiative that they had a few years back, where the villages are supposed to tie down all the roofs, look after your children, flying objects, all that has already been processed. And we have those ads going on. Now, in terms of private sector, we need to really focus on, otherwise we'll be going all over the place and not doing much. We should be focusing on what exactly this toolkit means to our private sector organizations. What does this mean for a bigger company like, say, FMF? And what does it mean for a canteen owner in the village? Because remember, if the FMF has insurance, but their objective in terms of the toolkit would be different, defined differently. They would be more of providing assistance to the smaller businesses, whereas the canteen would be more affected by the disaster. So that's where the paramedic insurance comes in. Also assistance from the government, COVID schemes such as the one you mentioned should come in, and those kind of synergies. So the toolkit should be more specific to that, rather than the broader conversation that we're having in regards to, you know, schools or educating and being advocates. We can do advocacy, but we're not first responders. Remember that. We are the people who come in way later. But the only problem that we need to address, that I see it keeps popping up, is getting the information on time to react. Because like Edward mentioned, a lot of these activities happen post-disaster. So by the time we get the stats and the data, the funding has already gone. It's already either gone on recovery or damage control, but nothing comes back to the private sector to assist on, you know, quick recovery from damages, those who did get affected. Also identifying who gets affected, and it's something that we can't, like Karunesh mentioned, but we can reduce the risk of it. So maybe if we can just focus on that and answer those questions, we will have a really good toolkit, which a private sector business owner can pick up and go on with. And I mean, I think the continuity template is already there. So the BCP component is already there. I really like the finance one. I really think that finance, if we can address the finance aspect of it, how to access finance or schemes that we can lobby to the government to make sure that it's already pre-existing. We don't do it, wait till the COVID happens, then we do a scheme. It should already happen that if you have a cyclone coming up, there is a scheme that you can tap into, the FNPF accounts or whatever. We need to be prepared, proactive rather than reactive. Thanks.
Perhaps on the slide,
Oh, good, thanks. Yeah, all well noted, great comments. I wanted to just refer to something you said, Edward, in the beginning on the language, because I totally agree that it's just a hazard that hits a country. It depends on the conditions on the ground, whether we say it's a disaster or not. I think that same philosophy should be applied to how we define disasters in the toolkit, because we had an experience last year with our parametric insurance product in March, I think, where after a rainfall event, under the NDMO Act, a natural disaster wasn't triggered. The threshold wasn't met. So government didn't respond, but our product triggered and there was a payout. And I'm just wondering, 7 years later, if a donor or somebody picks up the toolkit and looks that affect just thinking, fine.
so the question is, what should we do? Should we use disaster as what triggers the emergency service of government, or disaster what primary disaster?
Yeah, or a different wording altogether, maybe extreme hazard or something, or calamity.
Okay,
It could be a disruption or natural disruption.
yeah, fair enough. Let me go to that slide, the recovery one. So, I mean, to your question, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So when the humanitarian goes in recovery, like, what do you mean, like, what 2 to 5% of money?
Yeah.
They're going to mobilize to support businesses. Most of the money the donors is spent on humanitarian. Because the optics is there, you know, the house is gone, the child is not going to school. So donors just throwing money, but it comes to business. You know, so what we were thinking is to tailor the toolkit in 2 levels. One is the role of the private sector organizations and large individuals. Yeah. And then the toolkit, like the BCP and the parametric and all the winners, is focused on the markets. They will be the most effective. They will have the systems, the processes, the capacity to bounce back. So that's what we're thinking. Yeah, let's go back. So,
Okay, sorry, Aporosa from the Fiji Red Cross Society, Disaster Management Coordinator. I'll just to reiterate on your point on how to identify and activate the toolkit as well. For the society or the movement that we have an SOP. Even though it's not a declared emergency by NDRMO, we can still act according to the forecasted affected population. So whether if it's an isolated event, our SOPs are clear. If it's more than, let's say, 5,000 people, the branch responds to that. If there is more than, let's say, the population, then there's a different population, triggers different response stages. And I think that should be clarified in the toolkit as well, so that we don't rely on NDRMO's activation and wait for a total declaration of an emergency, then the toolkit is activated, because whether or not NDRMO will only act on the triggers that they have and declares an emergency. But for the movement such as Red Cross, our SOP clarifies whether it's an isolated event and we are able to respond or not. And it would be really good to have that in the toolkit as well.
Here then, Sila, just for understand. Okay. Here.
so the indicators could be the severity of the event, the population, but again, with the, for our angle, the number of businesses, the population, to do that. Okay, we can get the key indicators, and then this one also includes like the projected pathway of the site. And I think maybe we have that in the recovery part, but in the preparedness, you just go all out, just in case, you know, like you throw a wide net. Okay, so we have awareness and for wide. And even with that, for example, different response, like if it's an isolated event just for Nandi, we have the national office just offering 2 people to monitor, which is in the SOP. Skeleton team to monitor. Virtual monitoring can be. It has to be included in a standard operating procedure in order for us to know. If not, we run around like that whenever big call, we need help. Good point. Thank you. Yeah.
Can I?
If I may just please clarify, that's a very interesting point. And I'd like to hear about the Red Cross in Fiji. I know in other countries, there's a lot of anticipatory action, so preparedness and pre-preparedness interventions. Is there anything on that effort that the Red Cross is engaged in Fiji?
Simplified early action protocols. The first society ever to apply for it was Fiji Red Cross within the Pacific. It has a preposition 250,000 for funding that's already here, but it has specific triggers to meet as well. If it does not meet the triggers, we will not activate that protocol. But when it comes to anticipatory action, we work with the agriculture, food and agriculture organization, and our anticipatory action as well on that.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, just a quick one. So in terms of disaster and natural disasters, we've got a lot of things that we can reflect on through you guys and other organizations. But we were just also, I think you were getting to it, Edward, the disruption part. Because we also have to look at the disruption, like the recent closure of the main Nandi road. Utilities always fail on us in terms of businesses. Then you've got cybercrime. These are all major disruptions to business. So would a toolkit for private sector include this or should include that? I mean, that's something that we need to also think about.
So we did put the slide here, it's something that can build on. So the question is, should we include disruptions and go wider, or should we look at disaster, climatic events and disasters now and build on later? That's the question. What should we do?
Anyone? So one thing is the frequency of the climatic disasters compared to the frequency of the disruptions that we're getting. We're getting more disruptions rather than, so I think, like personally, I think it should be included based on that. Because when was the last, I mean, Winston was 2016, right? It's not that we're not preparing for another one, But then in between, we've had so many, water cuts, electricity issues, road issues, which is disruptive for businesses. So we can focus on those as well. I think it should be included. Yeah. Root cause? We will be here for the whole day. Yeah. No, it's more of a disruption, but when it comes to the impact it has. So if you really the trickle down impact of, say, for example, if a garment factory has to close because there's no water or electricity, and they haven't invested into any alternatives, they will lose business for that day. Therefore, the employees are going to go down with like what the pay cut is. They haven't got any contingency plans for it. And then all the way down to, what's the impact on the economy or the GDP in regards to that, if the frequency is too high. If we're having like every month there's a disruption, then there's something wrong. Now, it could be infrastructure, it could be certain upgrades, which we already know we have with water. But it's also, we can find solutions on, how can we have, solar, how can we have water tanks, and how can we, at private sector level, lobby at policy level and say, look, we need these standards to be re-looked at, whether it's construction or road maintenance, all those things can be influenced in that. Not saying that this tool should reflect that, but that's something that the direction should be.
So just to clarify, disruptions could include climatic events.
Yes, it's included. It's included. No, it's not a separate. It should be a disruption. Yeah, it's just the frequency varies. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, Alicia, get something.
Sorry, I'm just looking at it from the point of being effective. Like we always see that, there are so many toolkits, strategies that do not per se get adopted by the private sector only because they do not know how to interpret it. They don't know how to use it. So what are your plans in terms of ensuring that businesses actually adopt the toolkit? And in terms of monitoring and evaluation, like I've seen you have a few objectives that you would want to achieve with it. So how would you say that, okay, it was able to reduce like, the loss by the business? Like, do you have a monitoring and evaluation attached to the business toolkit?
But we got a couple of ideas, but we open for suggestions. So one of the things is to make it a compliance issue, compliance requirement. Yeah. So for example, we also sit on a few of our committees like at the Ministry of Employment. So we can say, hey, labor officers, you go and check for OHS policy and this plan. You might want to put in a checklist of business continuity plan. And in your reporting, you can just tell us how many businesses have that or don't have that. Identify it. The other one is where this is where our reserve bank comes in. These are MSMEs that apply for government grants, and maybe loans from like FDB that are supported by the reserve bank. Because they're accessing government funds, you want to make sure that they include in their application or the business plan a business continuity plan. Because why would you give them money and at the end of the day they do the same thing and expect the same result? And grants $0 million, but other money, another one. You want to make sure that in their business plan or their application, they have a BCP. So maybe that could be another requirement too. You're accessing government grants or government supported loans. I have those two ideas, but I'm very open to any other ideas in terms of monitoring and ensuring that this is not. Or maybe the parliamentary one could also be a requirement if you want to government. The thing is, you're taking government grant and loan and you're putting it to your business, and you want government to ask, how are you safeguarding that money? Not only through financial loss like mismanagement, but through climatic disruption. Because if not, then it's ground zero, again, they come back. Come back. Right, 2 ideas, I don't know the plural, but it will be open to other suggestions. Yeah.
I don't know, like, if in terms of monitoring, like, I know FSF has its members, but don't know if sharing of like income is confidential. Meta, I know like a lot of businesses don't share, but maybe one of the most effective ones would be to really see, like what your income was before and after adopting the toolkit, what measures were undertaken, and were you able to maintain the same income or not? Or maybe it could be possible, yes or no, or maybe the percentage reduction or percentage increase in income without really sharing, the figures.
Even maybe the first what was the income before, and what is the income now projected, we can figure out the number. Very good point. Maybe percentages or and then rationalize with some estimate. Good point. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. I think I take your point in terms of adding some of these as like requirements to accessing credit from the bank as part of all government grant. So take, for example, the MSME credit facility. If the MSMEs who are getting loans from those institutions, so the banks themselves make it a prerequisite that the BCP is a part of the requirement to be able to get that loan. I think that would be an effective way of trying to implement it. But on the other side, also, we're looking at access to funding. We're asking FDB to cut the requirements that are set for the micro and the small enterprises, so that they have easier access to funding. So from that perspective, does it add to those requirements, or just thinking out loud? But from our perspective, from the bank's perspective, we'll look at it from both ends. Huh? Yeah.
One of the ways we mitigated that in FSF brought PG Enterprise Engine, because one of the outputs when you finish the program is you have a business plan. So what we done is don't do a separate BCP plan, we integrate the business plan as a section. BCP is a section. So it won't be more burdensome to them. And when they go to the bank and say, where's your business plan? It already includes the BCP. Yeah, so it's already built in there. But also you have to access the forms easily, download it to put it to a business plan. Usually, how accessible it is to logistics and get it. It's too hard to get into it, too hard to think there. Okay, this point. That's a super important point that you're making. The enterprises taken on board this complexity.
Sorry, for the larger businesses, they can afford to get into this complexity, and they have the technical bandwidth to also maybe carry out these interventions and fill in the required forms and do that. For the smaller and the micro enterprises especially, you have a shortage and a limitation on both. And especially for small budding entrepreneurs, you don't want to complicate it to an extent that they're discouraged from bringing up their venture altogether, right? Or participating in this, whether it's trying to get a loan and to go through this process. So to your point, it needs to be something that's packaged well, packaged light, and in line with any existing processes, applications, or tools that may already be there, and finding a way to seamlessly maybe fit this in, whilst also balancing, ensuring you're covering all angles in terms of this toolkit. Yeah, so that's a very important point you're making.
Yeah, and maybe no, just adding on to that point, because there have been a lot of studies that outline MSMEs finding access to finance as a big challenge, and one of the reasons is because of too many documentation. So when we are saying to ensure that when they're applying for credit, that BCP is part of the documentation requirements, that's an additional documentation that you are adding to XYZ number of documents that they already have to submit, and coming back to the bandwidth, do they have, the capacity to even put together a PCP? And where does the private sector organizations come in to support that, particularly micro and small enterprises, to put together that BCP to support with the access to finance? So whilst that can be considered, perhaps also consider the type of support that the private sector organizations can provide to facilitate that process.
Just to quickly add on to that, like we don't want it to have a negative impact in terms of ease of doing business, because that would get flagged. So something, I know the intention is right, but then it might just bite us back in regards to ease of doing business. And I totally agree. Like there's a very small portion of MSMEs and micro business that have access to certain trainings before they apply for these grants, but the wider range, they don't. So they end up not applying. Yeah, thanks.
So in developing this, you make sure the finance is not too heavy, but they need to do that because that's the preparedness part. We skip it, don't come back again and ask for money for the same thing. That's the last thing. Yeah. So that's an important to understand. We will have those BCP forms and how to video how to put that together very quickly. Okay, included as part of the business plan, not a whole separate exercise. So in the business plan, they have their financial loss due to theft and stuff, but they don't have it due to disruptions. That's what we do. And even the trainings, the business trainings are there. The trainings are like, okay, it's finance and HR, go forth, everything will be okay, but they don't train on any disruptions. So this would add the BCP training plus the templates, including your business plan. That means that's a preparedness strategy.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, good thoughts, and interestingly, I mean, capacity is an important component in anything and everything we do. And Fiji and the other Pacific, I must say, at this moment is grappling with a major issue of capacity building. We don't have the skill sets. Whilst we may have some processes, does everyone who's there to follow that, will they be able to do that or no? So capacity is an issue. The objective of the toolkit is not to make it mandatory for anyone, to be regulated and things. It is a guide to ensure that you as a practitioner or a businessman is able to get some guide as to how you prepare yourself. Then again, I think the modalities will change from the organization type. I mean, we talk about insurance. Little do we realize that you cannot insure anything and everything. I mean, with the thousands of kilometers of roads, you'll not insure every road. You may do it for the bridge, but then in order for you to insure any particular thing, there are certain requirements, the category in which it's built to, or the standards that you've applied as a whole. So it's not going to be something that's going to be compulsory. It will be a toolkit that will allow you to get some guidance, but then at the same time, we can customize it. So it will not be cast in stone, something that is there that will develop or evolve in time as a whole. I mean, like in Fiji, and we talk about disruptions. Lightning is probably one thing that affects us. Maybe not as much, but recently we've lost 2 lives because of lightning. Lightning has become a cause of a lot of the power disruptions. So last Friday was lightning that was there. I mean, because it doesn't happen that often, and because it doesn't affect people and it doesn't take lives, as much, we don't probably value it in that way. But then if I look at a flooding event that we've had probably in 2020, 2021 during COVID and all, I'm not sure how many lives we'd lost. This was the one that TC Sarai which affected the Northern Division. Then I compare it to the lightning strike. I think more recently we've lost 2 lives. So it may have been an isolated event, but it took a life. So how do we value the severity of one disaster against another? I agree that maybe in the future we look at other disruptions, but small steps. So maybe let's try and take some of the things that affect us the way we need to ensure that we prepare, because if we don't, it takes lives, and that's that you cannot value. Then again, building property, asset, and economic activity as a whole.
So in your line, comments. No, okay. Stop it, completed the questions. The questions like this. You see anything next? Results, oh. Then the results for this picture, okay. Staff accountability checklist, we talked about that, activating the DCP. Life safety decision guide, yes, what to do at that time, you kids, documentation during disaster, we make sure that it's user friendly. Material coordination, we put them up, the role of the private sector organization. Yeah. Structure and safe response, emergency supply registry, we noted that, pre-commitment templates, goods and services, so what companies, large private sector companies can commit to during all response. Hence, we have list of what they need is needed, and list of companies that can supply. Clear coordination, same kind of pricing and liability. That's an interesting one because the prices go up, especially during recovery. How do you manage that? How do the percentage manage that? So, would you join the system? What concerns would you have? So maybe we can get that answer when we have a draft toolkit. This is MSMEs. Would you use this? Is it user friendly? And so. Sure. Personal time. Okay, so maybe we finish up now. So again, we just wanted to get your ideas to start as a concept to start working on the toolkit. Now we got some ideas and some validation towards direction. We will then in the next month or two, not 1 month. Work on development. And then present it about you and a wider group for validation. Then finalize and get the launch. So thank you so much for that.
Maybe if there's any written data.
Okay. Okay. So maybe by the end of the week, if there's something that you forgot, me like you, and we wake up to the ones that write it out. Please send it to Priscilla. And then Priscilla, by Monday next week, you can start putting it together and we get some on the. Thank you very much for what you did.
Thank you so much, CEO. Great discussions and even greater feedback. This is a good start. Thank you, everyone. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any comments, any suggestions. These are very valuable to us, and it's going to be taken on board. Moving ahead with the agenda, I would now like to invite our colleague from UNCDF to have a short session on parametric insurance.
I'm not sure if you got the presentation, Priscilla. So can I work my laptop or is it okay with the Teams on? Yeah, all right. Oh, yeah. No. Thanks, Priscilla. Avoided a disaster right there. So already in good hands with you. Looks like it. Not quite. Yes. Okay. I emailed it to you if that's easier, or I can give it right here. The training email ID? Got it? Here. Aren't you trouble, yeah? Here. Okay. Well, it's always great to be the last man or woman standing between you and lunch. I had planned a presentation for 30 minutes, so I'll cut it down to 25. Just kidding. Yeah, just 5 minutes. So please bear with me. My name is Sarathi Srinivas. I'm based in Chennai, in India. I've been with Fiji in the last 3 weeks with courtesy the UNCDF and RBF teams. But before Fiji, I've been living in Africa and in Asia for the last 17, 18 years, doing work on developing and experimenting and exploring parametric insurance solutions, but more broadly, inclusive insurance solutions for the global south. So this is Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, which brings us very nicely onto Fiji, right? And what I would like to share with you over the next 5 minutes, and feel free to cut me off, is something that we have developed very specifically for MSMEs in Fiji. And before I get into the heart of what we developed, I'd like to give you status quo. So the status quo, I think we've laid it out before. Karunesh, Edward talked about, the impact. This very age, that will be going by technology. In fact, something that we talked about almost every week since then. Just wait for the signed an MOU with PG last week, but maybe more on that later. In terms of the impact, just imagine you're a small business owner. Suddenly you're blazing with 200 kilometers per hour. Your sheets are going off one sheet at a time. Wake up in the morning, air pressure out, find your entire asset in piece soaked, all the equipment destroyed, and your 2 or 5 or 14 employees are waiting for the salvation. What do? Pressure and distress on all of them. How up your back? The lines are busy. After you manage to get through, you find out you have overnight gauge from a reliable customer to a non-curable risk and a non-bendable risk. Right? No loan, call up your insurance plan. They say it'll take 1 or 2 of us to call and even send a surveyor to your premise. What are the options? You borrow from informal lenders and extremely high rates. Lose your friends. Or shut it off. Right? So what we can do is identify various to the toolkit to parametric insurance to address them. The reason why traditional insurance hasn't worked, right? Less than 7% of MSMEs have insurance that covers disaster and climate risk. And the reason is either too expensive, takes too long, or it's too complex. The documents are fit for large enterprises or people very useful before they sign up. And that's what parametric insurance aims to solve. Simple, quick, and it's fast. The cyclone hits, or if they say the rainfall, payout in less than 14 days from the event. No claims forms, no assessors, just the moment a trigger is reached. And this word trigger is important. So what parametric insurance is based on is the category, the things suggest or trigger. If a category 3 or 4 or 5 cyclone hits, you get a payout. Right? They're not furnished with you or everyone talked about the coconut trees. Some are still standing, some are not. Right? If you're in the same location, both will get the same payout. Right? There may be material damage higher to someone else, but there wouldn't be time wasted assessing the individual loss. It might be someone's trees are fine, but the road is blocked, you can't sell it, and you have no capital for the next few years. It's still something. So because your asset is not sorry, parametric insurance, you don't have to worry about all of that. There is some effect, business interruption, or asset, or both. You get a payout based on predefined figures. You might ask how are these figures defined? They're based on 25, 30, 40 years of historical weather and climate data from various sources. from PG and from satellite sources, agricultural yield and the like. We put together models that correlate very closely with the impact of yield. Now, we put together 3 product options based on research conducted by various people in the last 2 years. And these 3 product options cover a pure parametric product, parametric plus employee benefits. So, okay.
Which slide are you?
Thank you so much, Priscilla. I may be on slide 6.
This one?
Further down. Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you. I'll navigate. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. So we've put together 3 product options. One is the core parametric solution. This covers cyclone and heavy rainfall. Heavy rainfall is a proxy for flooding. And for each division, there are thresholds that have been defined for heavy rainfall. The higher the rainfall, the more payout you would receive. Benefits that are given in terms of your amount receivable, what we call sum insured insurance, is between 2,000 to 10,000 billion dollars. We recommend that micro business get 2,000, small business get 5,000, and the larger ones get 10,000. But this is purely a suggestion or indication. Each business is free to what level of coverage they would like. The premium is 5% of the sum insured, but in layman's terms, it equates to, for example, for a 2,000 billion cover, this is per annum, it would equate to $8 billion per month. Okay? And that equates to $2 billion per week. The second option is the team protection. We have seen in the research conducted that businesses would like to cover their employees as well, especially when the team size is 5-15. Right? This cover enables the likes of hospital cash, accidental death benefit to also be layered onto the parametric. Option 3 is parametric plus indemnity as well. When there's significant stock or asset that you would like to insure in addition for parametric solution, option 3 is something that can come. These are the 3 options. We're happy to get into and separate technical the details of these options. But this is something that we would like your validation on. And just to set the record straight, right? You might be saying, Sarah, you're from India, nothing about context in Fiji, which right to an extent. But this is something that has been spearheaded by RBF, by UNCDF and various local actors, not this year, not the last year, but since 2021. And Fiji has been the pioneer in the Pacific for parametric insurance and has been recognized for the stewardship. So there have been payouts every year for the last 3 years. We haven't had recent cyclones, that's good, but the rainfall triggers have paid off various communities across Fiji over the last 3 years. We have 2 local insurers, Sun Insurance and Tower Insurance, who have their own products, slightly different, each covering different needs or different markets, right? Tower has with FPB, Sun Insurance is working with various aggregators across the Pacific. These are various global case studies of different types of parametric covers for MSMEs. You have ones, for example, that's linked to a mobile wallet. If you're a market vendor and there's heavy rainfall, and we see that your transactions have dropped over the last 3 years as well on your mobile wallet, there is an immediate payout just based on your mobile wallet balance. Okay, that requires a bit of modeling to get right, but that's an example of one that works. Second is Indonesia, heavily dependent as in Fiji on tourism. And if there's heavy rainfall, that affects flow of traffic to hotels, to restaurants, to events and the like. And so there's a rainfall-based trigger, which can be as short as a 3-hour cover based on some tickets and other events that are also. I will land with this one, right? The plan is to pilot and introduce this to the market in Q2 of this year. These are products that have been validated by the Reserve Bank and are in the process of getting regulatory approval. We have the insurance lined up, we have the regulator lined up. What we don't have lined up is the demand side in terms of your final feedback, your validation, and your supported ideas in terms of on the design side, what can be done? On the distribution side, what can be done? Who are the target groups that we can introduce this private group? And the ambition is to identify 150 MSMEs with a strong focus on the MS, the micro and small, to introduce this program for, with certain support or incentives to this initial cohort batch. So again, I'll pause here. Your interest, your feedback is very important. I appreciate it's lunchtime, but I would very much welcome your at least initial thoughts and happy to carry on the conversation offline as well. For podcast, happy to hear your report. Thank you for starting some. Great question. Okay, so the MSME parametric product. Yes. So this core protection product has been tested at a 1,000 and 2,000 PGM level of cover with aggregators and women borrowers of FDB through Sun and Power respectively. It has been running, cumulatively for the last 4 years. What this does is to seek on, look at building on that program with enhancing the cover options and limits on that core parametric, as well as introducing these other layer options 2 and 3 that are more relevant for MSME. So in sum, has been tested, same construct covering cyclone and rainfall has been running. What we're seeking to do is increase the levels of sum insured, also identify ways of premium financing, monthly installments and the like that could make this more appealing and attractive to MSMEs.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see in terms of like expansion to other Pacific Island countries. So basically, the definition of micro, small, and medium enterprises is very important in terms of the insurance scheme, right? So if countries don't have a definition of MSMEs, have you come across any sort of scenario where this might have happened, like in your experience?
Okay, great question. I'll maybe ignore the views of the Reserve Bank and other participants. I would say, whilst this is being labeled as an MSME product and has been designed and tailored to it, the semantics of what constitutes a micro versus a small is something that we would like to leave open in terms of what level of insurance they would like. So we're not going to restrict the coverage and the ability to avail this insurance based on certain classifications. What we might do, though, is seek to see how we can incentivize certain groups, particularly the micro, in terms of availing this type of insurance. So we might want to get into those, I wouldn't say semantics because that's not appropriate, but maybe those details of what contextual differences there are for the various segments and in terms of how they avail and maybe how we tailor the program as well. And I appreciate each country is different in terms of how they define, where they define in those cases. And so that might be a conversation that's worth having at that point in time. But really good question. Thank you for that. Kata.
No, maybe just to respond to Manisha's question on MSMEs and whether this has been piloted before. So coming back to your point, the first parametric insurance product that was rolled out in the market was mainly targeting smallholder farmers, which technically fall under the micro level, right? And then this MSME product is really because there's been a demand from the ground. As you know, as businesses grow, the preferences change as well. So not only are they looking at response solutions, but they're looking at response and recovery. And recovery kicks in when businesses grow and they need to ensure that whatever assets they have needs to be factored into the overall product design. And that's why we have this other option 2 and 3, but also looking at the welfare of their employees. the definition for MSMEs across the Pacific. So this is the first for Fiji and the Pacific. We are piloting this in Fiji. And of course, as you rightfully mentioned, across the Pacific, there are different definitions, whether they look at the turnover or whether they look at the number of employees, it depends. Generally, when we roll out parametric insurance, it's mainly targeting smallholder farmers, which already falls under the micro level across the Pacific. So as we move towards other Pacific markets, the solutions would then be tailored to their specific needs, rather than parachuting whatever we have designed for Fiji and then implementing that in Samoa or Tonga, so to say. So solutions that we design across the Pacific are tailored to their specific context and to the needs of particular segments. I hope that answers your question. Thanks.
Thank you, Akara, and Manisha for starting us off. I think very relevant context as well. In terms of the product, the target distribution as well, do you have any questions or thoughts in terms of who the cohort could be? Is the coverage something that is relevant? Yeah, and in general, is there any other lingering question or feedback or comment that you have?
Maybe a technical one. When it comes to cyclones, flooding, earthquake, fire, there's something there for us to see and know and understand. My question, and I'm just inquisitive, how do we measure lightning strikes? I'm not too sure in Fiji. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but do we capture when the lightning strike happens? I'm in the industry, and for us, our trigger or how we know it's a lightning strike because of a technical impact on the current. So we look at the discharge and the amps that it's created, and that for us is a lightning strike out there in the field, because quite often it may not be at sea level, it's up in the hills and things of that sort. With your experience, how do you pay out and how do you assess that a lightning strike has happened? It may or may not have caused disruption, and depends on to whom. I mean, a lightning strike on a dam may mean nothing, but then on a tower, it means a whole lot of things. For a business, it may or may not, depending on the type of business and ways. Look at how have you in the past assessed and paid out?
Fantastic question, Karnish. Thank you for calling this out. So in terms of the parametric component of this product, that is purely cyclone and excess rainfall. Cyclone is based on the wind speed and the proximity. Excess rainfall purely on the level, the of rainfall. In this case, it's the total rainfall over any 5-day spell. That's the detail in terms of the index. The reason 5-day spell is what's been used is because that's been a really good proxy for any level of inundation or damage or flooding versus a more short-term 1 or 2 day. So the 5-day rainfall will also capture very severe short-term spikes over a few hours or 1 day. But by capturing a broader index, you're covering also sectors like agriculture, like storage, warehousing, where continuous rainfall, even moderate rainfall, can cause significant damage. To your specific question on lightning, this is not covered under the parametric piece. It's under the parametric plus indemnity, which is the comprehensive package here. And this will be treated, fire, lightning, and earthquake will be treated as indemnity covers. For parametric, the perils that we're able to define, predefine right now in the global scenario is cyclone, flooding, drought, earthquake, and recently in Tuvalu, sea level and tides have also been introduced as a level of parametric. For lightning specifically, we haven't got there. So that will be considered under the indemnity portion, which is the comprehensive piece, where there will be an assessment of individual loss. Thank you for calling that out. So option 3 is the parametric. All the other pieces here would be treated on an indemnity basis, which is the traditional insurance where there is a loss assessment done. But the idea is with this option, if there is a cyclone, a heavy rainfall, that parametric component will be triggered, either in addition or separately if there is one of these other perils that would initiate an assessment of the actual loss. So we haven't quite got there in terms of parametric for lightning, but hopefully we will get there soon. Yes, Edward.
I've got a cosmetic question and a technical question. The cosmetic question is, yeah, essentially parametric insurance is micro insurance. To have it more palatable to micro businesses, including those in the rural community, why don't we just call it micro insurance? And then name the product a fancy name. And that's one. The second one is, you cover, the payout covers the stock in your business, a certain amount of it. To strengthen or reduce the risk of losses, would you think it's a good idea to require that they do a BCP training and have a BCP plan to get qualified for parametric insurance? Because what that allows is BCP doesn't only look at the stock in the building, it also looks at your, say, your supplier. So the stock that you have paid for that is yet to arrive. It also looks at your finished product that you would have done and it'll go to your customer, because that has another value. The product, you might have like 5 raw materials, you put it together, that value is higher, which you will send to your customer because it's not damaged. I'm saying BCP plus parametric could then together significantly reduce the risk of loss and damage to an MSME.
Again, very interesting points, Edward. Thank you for raising. So the first one, the cosmetic one, it's a very important one. It's come up repeatedly in especially recent conversations. I understand there was a survey done by the Provident Fund a couple of years ago on whether the members would want health insurance or parametric insurance. Any guesses on what the resounding answer was? Health insurance, you're very right. And it's not that they didn't like parametric insurance, it's that they didn't understand what that term meant, right? And so the cosmetic point is a very important point in terms of how this is positioned. Edward, you gave a suggestion? Micro insurance, yes. It is micro insurance, and micro insurance might be a term that's more commonly understood and relevant. Absolutely. There have been discussions on, Solomon Islands where the UNCDF team operates. They've labeled it as trigger cash, so that there's a better understanding of how this works as well. There've been conversations, from some insurers on emergency cash and labeling. But your point is absolutely spot on. Find a way to make sure the message is sent across in terms of what this is, who this is meant for, and how this operates, right? And micro is a term that's a lot more prevalent. So point very well taken. That's a message in terms of how we position this both in the toolkit and outside of it. Conscious of that. Okay, sorry. Second point was equally interesting, Edward. Would you remind me what that was? I have lost it. To qualify for parametric, yes. So for the third option, that is super relevant because the BCP then impacts the potential loss and the insurers are incentivized on the indemnity component to make sure the risk is also reduced. So it would be an incentive on both sides. On the parametric product, the way it works is just based on the location, right? The wind speed or rainfall. So that risk exposure of that location, not necessarily of the asset or how well the preparedness is. However, there's definitely a discussion and a dialogue in terms of how we can incentivize and bring the two together, right? So whether it's incentives for preparedness that are done either at a tax level in terms of your business or even in terms of your insurance, if you're subsidizing to an extent just to promote better awareness and planning, because the whole idea is, behind the insurance program is they're better prepared and there is risk transfer, right? And so coming together to get the message across definitely makes sense in terms of how you incentivize or promote it. For option 3, there's a definite angle for the insurers because there's a plus side for them as well. For the pure parametric, not so much, but then the higher angle or mission is definitely aligned. So I'm sure there's some discussion warranted in terms of how we achieve that. Yeah. Thank you for raising. Lapani's smile has turned into a frown. So with that, am I handing over for closing remarks, Priscilla? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we've reached the conclusion of our formalities. Just very quickly, thank you very much for taking out your time and being here. I forgot what I was going to say, Karunesh. You always do that to me. Disruption is the biggest disruption in the room. But thank you very much. We have lunch, which is complimentary from RBF. Thank you very much, RBF. So maybe without any delays. Thank you very much, and we shall now proceed to lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen. Yeah, that's okay. I'll answer them. You move around. Yeah. It's like the hotline. Yeah. Because of the this one is the idea of the info. Yeah, surprising. Those I did want to mention the last one, the micro insurance one. Then I guess you said it. Those are like the first one. But I was sure. I'm talking David last time. It's finance or yeah, David was like, yeah, we don't know if you said everything advocacy to talk on it, but most cases doesn't even know what issue. Like paramedic that makes it much worse. Hey, you're going for dinner tonight, right? Yeah. Hey, you and Jyoti hold the fort, please. Not feeling well? Okay, sure, no worries. And Pina told me to bring 2 more. So Watson is busy. I told Abni to go. Yeah. Then I asked someone else from the council. Sure. No, it's okay. It's fine. My charge is like
What do you?
The flashlight. What? You guys are waiting to have another meeting?
It doesn't solve for head disruption, right?
This is what Abhi was saying. Like,
No, I put it because I was telling him that the whole now this group division now runs on Stalin, right? Let's just take up tomorrow Elon Musk doesn't like something the Pacific Island Committee has said and be like, you know what? I'm deciding. Because it would just I don't know if he just recently shut down his entire electric car line. So all the Tesla owners almost support. Because he just said I'm gonna